Welcome to LED Live. I am really excited about the topic today. We're going to be answering the question, is our choice in music really that big of a deal?
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
Welcome everyone to the show. This is LED Live, the show where we use the light of Christ to expose the darkness found in media and our culture today. And today, to help us share, is my mom, Florence Callender. I call her Mama Callender. And she's coming all the way from New York, and she's really done a lot of research on this topic of music. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
Nice to
Let's
be
jump
here,
right
Candy.
into it.
Well, yeah, let's jump right in. I have an activity for you guys.
All right.
I love it.
As you think back to the creation of the world, put these things in order in terms of how they originated. We have angels, we have marriage, we have music, and the Sabbath. What do you think came first? What is next and next and next?
I would guess angels first.
Okay.
Wait, do we all have
so-
to go by Scotty's?
Okay, so you want to discuss it?
Well, I would think maybe Sabbath.
Okay, the Sabbath. Do you want to take a vote?
Sabbath
came first?
Sabbath was made for man.
Well, God's law is eternal, right? And the angels aren't even eternal.
That is an interesting principle that would get us onto a completely different topic. Yes, God's law is eternal, but what was God's law that is eternal? That's the question. Is it that there were 10 commandments written in stone? Or is it that there is a principle at work that is God's law that goes through?
I think we should put a timer on this.
Well, the Sabbath, they weren't supposed to pick up manna on the Sabbath, and that was before the 10 Commandments were given. So
We're talking creation here.
creation.
In terms of the origin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the angels existed.
Before the Sabbath.
Yeah, I mean, it was a constant worship, right?
Okay, so you want to go with Scotty's one?
Yeah.
You agree? Okay, so angels first. What's next?
Because
Music.
this was instituted. Okay.
I would say
Okay.
music.
He says music next. What's next?
Marriage.
I'm real close on this, but I'm tempted to flip these two. I'm just trying to think, like, is there a verse that I can think of that would make music come before angels?
But I would almost agree with Keith. I think these two could potentially be swapped just due to, we don't know if God is eternal, has always existed, but he's at some point created something. I don't know if any other being can have that same kind of, they've always been around. So at some
Okay.
point he brought the angels into existence and created them. And I just figure, since God is the originator of music, that he maybe was musical prior to the creation of the angels. So I'm actually going to change my...
There's two.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, so that's two. What
Yeah,
about
so
the others?
I'll
you
go
agree
with it.
that?
Yeah,
Okay.
it sounds good.
Trying to think of a biblical basis for that. But yeah, it makes sense because all of a sudden it's like you create angels and they're like, hey, what do we know? God's like, hey, I got music,
Right.
Okay,
It's like, wait a minute.
so I come back to your order in a little bit. But first,
Visit our brothers at schoolforprophets.tv and watch From Babylon to America, which has over 5 million views on YouTube alone. And follow it up with America to Babylon. Check the description below for links to this and more.
let's look at the Bible. That's what you're looking for. The first mention of music in the Bible actually is in the lineage of Cain. And that's a lineage of rebellion. So in itself, that gives us a caution. It's a red flag for caution. It's a warning. And that's in Genesis chapter 4, verse 21, where it says, and his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such as handle the harp and the organ. So the scripture also tells us that music was given as a gift to Lucifer. And that's a clue right there. When he was created, and we find that text in Ezekiel 28:13, the workmanship of thy tabrets or timbrels and pipes was prepared in thee the day that thou wast created. Now the Old Testament takes us back even before Lucifer. And in each of its sections, the law, the writings, and the prophets we are told that God is our strength, our song, and salvation.
Amen.
So music predated Lucifer. Lucifer is an angel.
You guys got it.
Yeah, nice.
So not only is God our song, he also sings. So Zephaniah 3:17 says, "The Lord thy God in the midst of thee is mighty. He will save, he will rejoice over you with joy. He will rest in his love. He will joy with sing over thee with singing."
I wonder what like God's singing voice sounds like.
Like a million choirs
Yeah.
at once. Like,
Yeah, you know.
Highest soprano, lowest bass.
yeah.
We
Wow.
can't even imagine. It says higher than our highest human thoughts can think. You know, so what does all of this tell us? Music is from God. So your order here is actually correct.
Well, you
Music was first because it originated with God and God is eternal. Then he created angels, of which music was an important part in the chief angel Lucifer. Then when the creation week happened, marriage was created right before the Sabbath. So that's the order. So then what is music?
I would venture to say it's an expression
Yeah.
of maybe how you feel, or you know, I don't know, just listening to that verse that you just read is the Lord singing over you. You know, it's like He's expressing His feelings for you.
Okay.
An artistic way to get out a message, like poetry is, or writing a love letter. Sometimes people are like, I can't say how I feel, but I can write it in a song or something.
Yeah. I would say music is sound.
Okay. What about you?
No, I mean, I don't think I have anything to add to all that. That was all good.
So your descriptions of music is music as the noun, the thing. Music is also a verb. So as a verb, music means, it comes from the root word muse. And muse referred to a god or goddess in Greek mythology. It also means to control thoughts
Wow.
or to make think. So by its very definition, music is designed to control the way people think.
You can see that in society too.
For sure.
I can attest to that. Just being a creative, when I edit, if I actually have a piece of music that inspires me, I see a different way of piecing together those pieces of video. And changing the music actually changes the way that I would actually line those up.
Very good. Yeah, and music is powerful. It's more powerful than speech. And you actually remember what you sing better than you remember what you say. I don't know about you guys, but when I was in elementary school, I learned the times tables by singing them because I found those things the most boring of all. Why do I need to learn this stuff? And so the only way I could have learned them was by singing.
You're going to grace us with an example, right?
Yeah. 1 times 1 is.
I think all of the times table songs are just about the same. And some of them really are more chanting than
Yeah, that's what I was
singing.
thinking.
It's not like a melody running through, it's more like chanting. But it has the beat and the rhythm that keeps your mind going. And so that's how I learned it. Did any of you have a similar experience? Or was I the only
Yeah.
one who needed music to
Not
learn
with
that stuff?
timetables, but that you learn your ABCs with a song. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we
right.
often use that as an example. I'm like, it seems like it would be tough because it doesn't really rhyme or anything, but I have noticed that songs will stick in your head even when you don't want them there. I mean, I spent like 2 days hearing something about this Christmas song about I want a hippopotamus for Christmas. Would not leave my head, driving me insane. And you know, I didn't put it there.
My daughter, my daughter and my son, they go to a Sabbath school where the teacher of the Sabbath school actually encourages them to memorize the verses and send them videos. And if they do that every single week of them, like in their memorization, at the end of the quarter, she brings them a gift. And I think it's really
Awesome.
neat. She actually drives to each of the children's houses with this box, and it's like the kids, and they're not like little meager gifts either. But what I have observed, it's interesting, my daughter, she's kind of musical, and she quickly made up songs to remember the Bible verses. And you could still go to her today and say, what does this Bible verse? And she'll sing it to you and sing it
That's
back with
awesome.
like saying every single word. So she's learned that if she just adds a little tune to it, it really does stick in your brain.
And that brings me to my next point. Did you know that the largest book in the Bible is a hymnal? It's a book of Psalms. The book of Psalms has the most chapters in the Bible, and a psalm is a sacred song or hymn. So the book of Psalms is a book of music, and most of the scripture songs that we sing come from the book of Psalms.
One day we'll get to hear David really tell us, sing it how
Yeah.
it's supposed to go.
He's like, it didn't sound like that at all. You know?
That's right. We don't have the harp that he had.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, here's another question for you guys. What is the control center of the body?
The brain.
The brain.
Yeah.
We agree on that?
Frontal lobe.
Well, you're really specific. The part of the brain. Okay. That's correct. Neuroscientists and musicians, they have explored how music impacts our brain functions. So if music can impact your brain function, do you think it influences the body?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the brain, as we just said, is the control center of the body. Now, in the medical field, it was noted that low-weight babies, when exposed to healthy music, that they developed more quickly than babies who were not.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, like, I don't know if this is true to whatever, but it seems like people in the medical field, they can play like a cello or a piano like amazingly.
Yeah.
So is it just because they're incredibly intelligent, or is it that they played the music which made them incredibly intelligent to go become a doctor?
I never put those together.
I mean, if you go to Loma Linda and you hear some of these medical students, it's like they play the piano like they practice it 8 hours a day, and it's like, aren't you in medical school? Like,
They started that way before medical school.
yeah,
though.
yeah.
But it also may apply to other industries. If you go look at the people who are exceptional in the work that they do, a lot of them also play musical instruments.
Like opens
So-
up the mind in a
Yes,
in
there
a way.
is there is a connection between playing music and cognitive performance. There is
Wow.
one.
You mentioned babies like responding positively to music and God being a musical being. I remember reading a study, but years ago, so I hope it's still like I say it accurately. But a scientist like unwound a DNA strand, and the is it the RNA that was on the strand of the DNA is actually like notes,
Oh, wow.
and he could like play a tune specific to each individual. I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool.
Wow.
Like
So-
we all have our own sound.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
music is actually imprinted in our bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, the auditory nerve ending, the auditory system has more nerve endings over your entire body than any other sensory system.
Wow.
So that just gives you a little hint there about how we'll be affected by music. Now, in the Burnett Honors College, there is a subject called Music and the Brain. And there's a tag team of teachers, a neuroscientist and a violinist. And one of the things they teach their students that people who have neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, they actually respond positively to music. So usually with Alzheimer's in its late stages, those people are really non-responsive. But what they found is if they put headphones on them and they play usually snippets of their favorite music, then their eyes light up and they actually start moving and sometimes even singing. And that effect will last up to like 10 minutes after the music is turned off.
I've heard that. I've also heard that people who have really bad stutter can sing without stuttering.
Yes, they do. And I can tell you that for a fact. As a speech pathologist,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
That's right.
So when most children, when they read and when they sing, they do not stutter. If you have a child who stutters when he or she is reading, you know the stuttering is really profound.
So is it more because they're trying to think of what to say, but if they're reading it, it's already there? Or
Well, it has to do with the rhythm. Our brain has rhythm. Whether we say we can sing a tune or not, your brain has rhythm, and every cell in your body has rhythm.
Wow.
And so, because it's not voluntary. You don't have to think about it. It just comes naturally. Then the stuttering, which comes because you're afraid you're going to make a mistake on this sound or that sound, that's really very voluntary. So it removes that component.
Gotcha.
And the
I
singing
think it's
flows.
interesting if you look over the history of how man has used music. I mean, we use it in such a wide variety of ways. When we would go to war, there would be somebody in there, like playing music, and these terrible things are happening. And then, to heal somebody with music. And I mean, there's such a wide variety of uses for it.
Yeah, and we are going to come down to the instruments a little later. So if the human body can be controlled and altered by music, the scientists are saying that happens because music actually changes the brain by creating new pathways. So it changes the neural pathways or the nerve pathways in the brain, and by so doing, it creates changes in the body. And in fact, we actually have MRI images that show when music is played, the brain lights up in many different parts. Unlike other things, that it would light up one part of the brain or the other part of the brain, music is just, it goes all over the brain. So in terms of human physiology and anatomy, and many aspects of health, there are lots of medical studies that actually show us how music is used to affect health changes, like to lower blood pressure, to treat mental illness, to treat mental retardation, to treat people with insomnia, and many others.
Would that be very specific on what type of music is played, though? I mean, like, I could imagine some types of music raise the blood pressure.
Yeah, I was just thinking if there's any skeptics, just listen to some horror music or something. It's not going to give you a pleasant feeling,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leads me to my next point, where I just said that music creates these neural changes and it results in functional outcomes. There's one of the studies, there are many studies, but in the Wisconsin study, they showed that joyful music produced an increase in blood flow, and that increase was similar to aerobic exercise, and it was actually a better result than laughter or even relaxation.
Interesting.
That's the power of music, joyful music. Now, on the other hand, the same study found that the converse was true. So the power of music can work both ways. So when the selections were ones that triggered anxiety, and you can create that with the instruments that you use, then the listeners produced a decrease in their blood flow.
I remember seeing like a video that actually they hard-boiled an egg by sticking it in front of a speaker. Did you see
At
this?
a rock concert or something.
Yeah, and it was like, I don't remember if that was ever scientifically actually proven. Or what about the, playing certain types of music to a plant and the plant dies, as opposed to if you play it really nice music, it thrives.
I've seen a Mythbusters on that.
And that's not true.
Not the plant. I've seen the Mythbusters on the egg, the egg one, because what the whole thing was that as the music is playing with the heavy rhythm and the noise, the protein in the egg coagulates, and so it boils the egg.
Wow.
So we have the pros and the cons with that.
Interesting.
And if that's
So-
an egg, imagine our
Yeah, right.
bodies.
What's it do to your mind if you're like...
We have protein in our bodies, so
Sure.
what's happening to not just our mind, our entire bodies.
So
But
it's not
with
just
the
like the
plant-
vibration, it's actually the music. Like you couldn't hardboil an
music-
egg with classical music? Or?
Music is vibration.
Yeah, but I'm
So
saying
the
with the
different
classical music?
rhythms give you different levels of vibration. So
I always thought if you talk to your plants, they do better. Like, I actually tell my plants, I love you, like, thank you for giving me food. And this way, if it helps,
But
I don't know.
actually, yeah.
Maybe my tomatoes are bigger.
I think the plant studies there's more validation in that. There are children who did science experiments with plants. And one that I read some time ago, this young boy, he played 3 kinds of music to his plants. So he had classical music with some plants, and then he had Christian music, and then he had rock music. And the plants with classical music and Christian music thrived. The ones with the Christian music thrived more than the ones with the classical music. And the plants that had the rock music played to them, within 3 weeks they were dead.
No, that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's alive, right? I mean, at some level, it's, I don't know, it probably doesn't understand what you're saying to it, but
Yeah, even the wind and sea obey him. That's what the disciples said in awe to Jesus. It's like the plants recognize the Creator.
But remember also that music is vibration. Sound is vibration. And vibration, when it comes into your body, depending on the level of vibration, it's going to have different effects on our bodies. And so that it makes sense to me, having studied sound and its effect on the body. Then I can understand how the heavily rhythmic music can actually damage the body systems, the cells, because they are susceptible to sound waves. So that we're talking about that was about how music affects the body in terms of health. Well, our emotional health is tied closely to our physical health. So if music affects the physical health, do you think it also affects the emotional health?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If we don't feel good, our emotion is down.
That's right. The answer is yes. And listen to the statement from the Canadian Mental Health Association. They said, mental health and physical health are fundamentally linked. And there is a longer quote which will be in the resource guide attached to this episode. So there is a reason why people play salsa music or merengue music for Zumba classes. And that in the movies, suspense type music is played for movies like Jaws. I mean, would you play the music from Jaws as a lullaby to put your baby to sleep?
I know. I think sometimes we think, oh, it's just association. You've heard that in horror movies. But I heard another guy talking about this subject, and he said he played just horror music, like music from a horror movie, to his congregation, and like a little 2-year-old like went and grabbed his mom, scared. This kid had never been exposed to horror movies, so for any skeptics that think it's association, there is something scary about that. And I think it's a lot of it's played like out of tune.
Oh yeah.
And
dissident sounds and like, real.
And you can hear a song for the first time that you've never heard this song, so you're not familiar with it, and somebody hits the wrong key, and you're just like,
right. Yeah.
Even though you've never heard the song before, you're just like, that don't fit,
It brings this raucous sound to you because it's out of tune. Yeah. So the right song can actually create any desired mood, and it can also create the thoughts to go with that mood. Wow. And your thoughts, the type of music you play can cause your thoughts to go in any of a variety of different directions and moods. So you can use music to make people sit down and study. You can use music to make them get up and dance. So it can make you angry, it can make you sad, and the power of music, some types of music just exert uncontrollable power over the body. It's like, so when you hear certain types of music, you cannot control your body. So for example, if you hear a tango, can you tango to a rap tune?
Probably not really well.
Right.
Yep. What about do a rock and roll dance to a waltz? They just don't go together.
Right.
And so that tells us the power that types of music have over our body. Your strong muscles and your powerful mind, they can't go against the will of the molecules that are dancing around us, which our brain interprets as sound.
Wow.
My younger brother, he spent some time he thought he wanted to be a DJ. In fact, he got pretty big in one of the cities that's close to here and would always DJ in clubs and stuff. And I remember as I was just asking him about it, he would always tell me that as the DJ, you're controlling the audience. And that there's actually, they call it a set when they put together all their songs for the night. And there's an actual flow into, like you would a story. There's a climax, there's a peaking, and then there's a resolution of that. And there's like a 3-act system that the DJs sit down, and as they develop the songs, they're actually like this song, you can't play it over here. It has to go here, and that puts the audience in a certain
Trance.
yeah, for lack of
It's
a better
even
term,
called trance.
right?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and there's a method behind that. But I was kind of shocked by. Like I asked him all the time, like, you actually sit down and think about this? Like, you don't just, I like the song and I want to play the song. It's like, no, there's an order to it.
Load up the playlist.
Right? Right?
Yep.
But
And there's an order to a lot of music that happens in places. Commercial music, the music you hear in the elevator.
Yeah.
And there's actually a genre of music called Muzak. Muzak was designed to create or to influence buyers. So when you go into stores,
Very
the music
rhythmic.
is played. If they want people to leave the store quickly, it's a different volume and tempo than if they want you to walk around and browse and buy more. I mean, these things are calculated.
Yeah.
They're not happenstance.
Think about you get put on hold, right? What kind of music do you get?
It's nice music.
It's nice music. They want to keep
You're
you calm.
steaming.
They know you're probably calling and you're not happy.
And now some people actually ask you for your choice of music or
Yeah.
whether you want to listen with music or
true.
or in
Or
silence. Yeah. So they're learning. Yeah. And this phenomenon is even reflected in our vocabulary, in our language. We talk about being moved by the music,
That's right.
which means it's not static, it's dynamic, and it does something to us. It moves us in whichever direction the type of music we are listening to will. So let's look at two effects, one psychological, one mental effects that music can have on us. In the educational circles, researchers have found that when certain types of classical music, usually by Mozart, is played in the background when college students were studying, that their learning performance was enhanced. So that's called the Mozart Effect. I don't know if you've heard about it. And then in terms of the psychological effect, music can reduce the symptoms of depression. And there are studies that have proven that. And in music therapy, it's considered to be a safe and effective treatment for a variety of disorders, including depression as well as anxiety in patients.
Which I think is really dangerous when you have depressed individuals listening to depressive music.
just thinking about that.
Like
Billie
Depeche
Eilish.
Mode, you're gonna just go like, more into depression or something.
Yeah.
And you obviously maybe you want to sit and sulk in your
Yeah, it seems that people do
depression.
gravitate towards that. I'm depressed. I want to listen to
Or
Billie
you're
Eilish.
angry and you want to just listen
metal
to like
music.
somebody screaming,
And
but
there- yeah.
that could be bad.
And there are studies that show you the emotions that are evoked by different kinds of music. And we can put that in the resource guide also.
Well, that makes me think of David obviously being invited to play for Saul. He's crazy and out of his mind, and David, just by his playing, put him back into a rightful mind.
His playing cast demons out of him.
Exactly. So if we look at the duality of life, if certain types of music can cast demons out of you, would other kinds of music actually attract demons to
Invite
you?
them in. I believe so.
It's something to think about and something to research, right?
My son is learning to play piano, my oldest, and he's drawn to these minor keys when he's practicing, and he'll be playing, Moonlight Sonata, and he's the type, he'll just do it over and over and over and over and over again. My wife's just like, please play something else. It's so minor, it's somber.
Yeah, the power of music. So you talked about instruments. I'm just going to give you just 3 examples of the emotions that are evoked by different kinds of instruments. So for example, the horn, and the trumpet is one kind of horn, that can evoke attention, alertness, sharpness. And you notice that in the Bible, every time the trumpet was referenced, it was in reference to a celebration or either going to war or celebrating victory coming after war. So that's the type of emotions it was evoking. And then you have stringed instruments, of which the violin is one, and those can evoke pain, and sorrow, grief, sadness, as well as excitement, involvement, and even anger, depending on how those strings were played. Now, David played a harp, which is a stringed instrument. And so he was evoking probably excitement or maybe moving in, you know how you said the DJs arrange music from one to the other? He may have been moving Saul from his grief and his sadness into excitement.
Wow, that's interesting.
You know, he may have been directed to use his harp in that way. And then we have the orchestra, which is a family of instruments. So the orchestra actually tells stories, and those stories are felt through emotional changes of experience as the orchestra goes through the various changes in song, in tune and song and rhythm and tempo and all of that.
Yeah, a lot of older cartoons don't even have talking. It's all just.
Well, I think it's such a powerful genre of music, because we still listen to music from like the 1400s, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people still drive around in their cars listening to classical music, and it's stuck around for that long. I mean, almost every major film uses that, and so it's a powerful thing.
There are entire stations that just play classical music. That's just to tell you how it is. So what neuroscientists have found is that music triggers the release of mood-altering chemicals in the brain. When these chemicals are released into the body, the mood changes.
Before we move on to that, I remember having this discussion with Kendi when we were kind of observing Kanye West coming out. And do you remember that clip that you showed me, I think it was, where Kanye West, when he was coming out of producing worldly type music, and then he's all of a sudden turning Christian and going into the church, and he says, I didn't want this and this and this drum, and he even named like the different types of instruments that he did not want in that worship service. And to me, that was telling of like, wow, here's a musician who understands like exactly what music is going to do for you and put you in that mood or whatever. And he was saying this is not appropriate in this setting. And I thought that was a powerful clip to observe that.
It is. And that's actually a topic for a whole other discussion, because different drums have different rhythms attached to them, and they bring different results based on the drumming and syncopation and the polyrhythm, the layering of rhythms one on another. And they get the results that they want when they use those drums. So that's a whole nother study.
That'll be part 2.
That's right.
Yeah.
So while music can certainly impact our moods, the type of music is important, which we have been bringing out in our discussion. Now, according to research, classical and meditative music offer the greatest mood-boosting results, while heavy metal, rock, and techno music have been proven to be ineffective and even detrimental to the body systems.
We've talked about the two extremes here. We've gone classical, which is, I guess, like the purest of musics, and then you have heavy metal and rock, which is the most detrimental. What about like in the middle, like Brandy, R&B, or like Kirk Franklin
Lady
choir
Gaga.
music,
Oh.
or like Kenny G jazz? You know, like where does that fall?
So just as you have a spectrum with most things, so when we talk about classical music would be on the spectrum of, on the end of the spectrum in terms of beneficial music, mood boosting music, good thinking, good thoughts music. On the other end, you have the heavy metal or the rock and the techno music, which is detrimental. It gives you dark thoughts and anger. The other kinds of music fall along the spectrum. And so some of them would be close to classical, and as you move up on the list, the type of music, they get closer to the heavy metal and the rock music. There is a spectrum.
How much do you think actually the creation of the music, you know, you often hear an artist puts themselves so much into the music, and that when you listen to their music, you're actually taking on sort of the spirit that they created it in. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I remember there was a musician back in the 90s, I think her name was Tori Amos, and she had been abused, and she wrote a lot of that into her music. And it wasn't necessarily like heavy metal or rock or anything like that, but I mean, it was just like you could feel her anger or pain and things when you listen to her music, and it's like you almost kind of took that on when you were listening to it. So that's maybe something to consider too as well. It's not just the rhythm or just what instruments are being used in it, but actually how was that created, and what's the sort of the spirit that was in that creator's mind when they actually created that music, and does that somehow influence or affect us?
But remember earlier we were talking about music influencing our mood. So the creator of the music, when they are creating the music, they have to be in some type of mood. They make a conscious decision on what they want their music to portray, how they want their music to affect the listener. This is conscious. It's not a happenstance. It's not a by the way thing. And so if the spirit of the music is for it to induce anger in you, when you listen to it, you will feel angry.
Right.
If the person who's creating the music infuses a spirit of pain and sorrow, you're going to feel that when you listen, because music moves our emotions.
In classical music, is there a variety of classical music that you would say is maybe not as I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, because I don't want to say it's like evil, but it's like maybe not as beneficial for you to listen to as other ones? Like
there is. That is why the educational studies specifically refer to Mozart's music as the Mozart Effect, because what they found is music that has 60 beats per second most aligns with the brain. So when the beat per second varies, then you have the differing reactions on the brain. And so yes, you have classical pieces that are light and airy, and you do have classical pieces that go the gamut of emotions, that go into the dark and deep areas also. It works for most types of music. I mean, the heavy metal and rock music, that's just it. It's just always kind of intense emotion, anger, rebellion kind of thing. But with classical music, there is a variation. Maybe because of the instrument, because of the piano, piano or organ, you can get a variety of emotions there. Whereas with guitars and drums, it's really restricted in terms of the sounds that you get.
It's interesting that they always speak of rock as being rebellion. It's like the very nature of how it's either put together or what it really promotes, or I don't know. It's just that rebellion seems to go hand in hand with the rock world. And I always just think like music is so neat that it was created by God, that you play together with other people. And it's like everybody brings to the table this like little bit of a unique sound or a little bit of a thing. And when you put them together, it can make beautiful music. Or you can have somebody who's off in a different sound, and it's like the more that is off, or the more that someone's screaming and it's not hitting those notes right or something like this, it just seems so much like a metaphor for how we are in our world. It's like we either work together or we're like clashing and clanging up against each other and sort of pitting each other against each other, or we work together.
It's actually a good metaphor.
That is.
Because when one note of the music is off, it brings discord instead of harmony. And the same thing in life, when certain things are off, then in the group or the community, then you get discord or disharmony. So in many Christian churches, the type of music is changing or has changed. And it has become more heavily rhythmic and less melody-based. I don't know if you have noticed that, but in the church circles where I go, that's what I have seen. So many years ago, when my daughter here was about 7 years old, I got tired of driving for 40 minutes to the church that we used to attend. And I started searching around for a church that was nearer home, but one that had a strong children's ministries department. And after searching for a while, I found one, and it was only 10 minutes away from me. And so we went there, and it was really a wonderful experience. When we started worshiping there, there was a chorister, one person, and there was a piano and an organ. We sang hymns, we sang choruses, it was a very happy worship setting. And then over time, over about 15 years of going there, the music just imperceptibly changed. Until one day I noticed, wait a minute, the music is louder than the voices. Wow. And so when I started looking, by then a band had been developed, one by one, little by little, without really making a public statement. They had been adding instruments. So a bass guitarist had been added, rhythm electric guitar had been added, a synthesizer had been added, a drum set had been added. And it just became like, wait a minute, when did we get this band that is so loud? Music is supposed to accompany voices, but here the voices were accompanying the music, and then most people had even stopped singing. We're just listening to the music. And it just seemed that from that point of realization, every week the music got louder and more secular in its tone. If you were in the foyer of the church, and there was singing going on, or there was a music experience happening, many times you couldn't tell the difference between the kind of music that would come from a club and a church. If you couldn't hear the lyrics, you wouldn't know the difference.
I've seen that
And
too.
after a while, I started going to church with earplugs. So as soon as the music started, I just went down low and stuck the plugs in my ear and came back up and just, sat until it was finished. At one point, it got to the point where I actually had to leave. I would leave the service and go walk the neighborhood until I thought the singing part was ended, and then come back. So
which is actually quite interesting, because a lot of times don't you hear people go to that worship service because of the music? Like I hear that a lot from young people. Like, I want to go to church here because the music.
And the same young people will tell you that the type of music they get in church isn't different from the type of music that they listen to during the week. So if the type of music is not different, then how is your life being changed? How is it influencing you to draw closer to God? So one day now, I was talking to the music director. I mean, he was a friend of mine. And I said to him, why have you changed the music so drastically? What's the cause for this? And he said, it's okay to worship God according to our culture. God is acceptable of that. And I'm saying, our culture? He's like, yeah, our culture, it's an African culture. We can worship God. And I'm thinking, but I see that kind of music in all churches, regardless of the culture. They've all moved in the same direction. This is true. So there's got to be something different. Not too long after that, we were blessed to go on mission trips. So we went to Seychelles, and the Seychelles is a group of islands east of Kenya in the ocean, the Indian Ocean. So we went there, we spent 5 weeks. We went to Kenya, we spent a month. We went to Nigeria, we went to Nigeria twice. One time 5 weeks, one time 3. And what I noticed, in most of all the churches we went to in Seychelles, all the churches we went to in Kenya, there were no musical instruments except for sometimes a piano, sometimes an acoustic guitar. One place there was both a piano and an acoustic guitar. In Nigeria, all the churches except one had no musical instruments or a piano or an acoustic guitar. And the one that had drums was a mixed church where there were students on a campus, a hospital campus. And I was told that the drums were brought in because the students were mandated to attend church, and they came from so many different places and religions. So I asked my host, one of them, I said, this is Africa. How comes you guys have no drums in the church? And the man said to me, and I'm going to read his statement. He said to me, drums are for voodoo ceremonies, not our church.
Wow.
Wow. So when you think about that, well, I guess the answer is yes. The drums are a part of African culture, but we can compare that to the food in African American culture. If you remember soul food, what are the meats consisted of? Like the neck, the intestines, and the feet of the animals. When you look at history, slaves were eating that because that's all they had access to. That's what the masters were giving them. So when people, the question is like, why are people still eating that today when we have access to more healthier options, even though it was a part of history, our history. So when it comes to music and the things that we have learned, how it affects the brain, how it affects the body, why are we holding on to certain traditions and cultures when there are more healthier, uplifting choices out there?
Yeah, as soon as you mentioned African culture, that's what I was thinking, like voodoo and stuff. You made a point, though, about how less people were singing when the band grew. I saw that me and some friends, we started hosting this like once a month thing called the Hot Spot. We had college kids come, and the first night was like 10 people, and we just sat in a circle, and I shared my testimony, and one of the guys played an acoustic guitar, and every person was singing. I mean, we were looking at each other, and it was just an acoustic guitar, and every voice was singing. But as it grew, there was like a band, and it was just because we were looking for music. We didn't really, there was like one or two people that played music, but we were trying to look for different people, and so people would be like, oh, we play. And I noticed that when they'd be on stage, when it went from being a circle of everybody looking to each other to rows looking at the stage, nobody sang. Nobody. Like not one person. They just watched the band like it was a show. So that was interesting that you brought that up. I never really put the connection to why, but I did bring it up. I was like, I like when we did the circle. I didn't know if it was the circle or if it was but yeah, it probably is the music.
It's probably both.
Yeah.
Because the circle is inclusive of everyone. But if you're sitting in rows, the people on the end, they don't feel the same like the people in the middle.
Yeah, and all attention is up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading an article a gentleman wrote about how music has become entertainment and people no longer sing in churches. So he was looking at churches across a number of denominations, and what he was saying is, when you bring the band in, I guess our minds, or we have been socialized into associating bands with entertainment. So when you bring the band into church and they play, especially if they're playing loud, and based on the genre that they're playing in, there are certain genres that they just can't play soft.
Yeah.
They have to increase the volume. So it becomes entertainment. It's no longer inclusive worship, and that's why people stop singing, because in their mind, their brain tells them this is entertainment. Wow. So what would you do in a concert? You sit and listen. So if a concert takes the place of the singing in your church, you sit and listen.
Wow.
I still think it's really interesting that we use the term entertainment and it's turning into that. Yeah. When enter means to come in, tain means to, possess, and then ment means to keep in that possession. And it's like to come in and possess you and hold you in that state.
Exactly.
Is
being entertained.
Yeah, is very interesting. Rather than, I'm sure God designed music for us to join in together and to share that experience together. And yeah.
If you're interested to learn more about what Scotty just said about entertainment and to delve deeper into that, check out our episode called Actors Channeling Spirits, Part 2.
It's also a reinforcement, because the more people have the mindset that they're being entertained by music, the less people are singing, the less they're developing those skills, the less children are growing up with that idea of playing instruments and learning how to sing. And so you just reinforce not doing it.
Yeah.
I didn't really grow up singing, so that's not a strong component in my life. I really struggle with that. I'm the guy that'll make the joke about, hey, if you want everybody to leave, just let me start singing. I would love to be able to play an instrument, but that was never part of my growing up either. But I'm trying to provide that for my kids. Like my wife grew up singing. She was in a choir. She's good. And my kids are learning to play piano, and I got a daughter that plays violin and all this. I'm trying to encourage that because I see if you don't encourage it, it's going to be lost.
Yeah.
And then it's not.
His wife and children actually have a gift. Like, you can sing a hymn song to them, and they just need to hear it once, and then they just will repeat it back and sing it back. It's pretty impressive for me to observe, because it's like, I can hardly always remember the hymns, and like I can get the first verses out, and then the rest I have to kind of like look at it and read it.
But it's never too late to start something.
Yeah, my problem now is time.
Okay, because it's also mindset. Sometimes we tell ourselves, I'm too old to do this.
No, I don't think I'm too old.
Okay.
I would love to pick up piano at any age. That's the instrument I think is for me, but I just don't have the time to dedicate to that right now.
Well, when you hear things all the time, like you can't teach an old dog new tricks, I thought it was like true, but I have a friend, Darius, he was on the show. Since I've known him, he can play guitar and sing at the same time, and I just assumed he's been doing this since childhood. He was like, yeah, once I stopped, playing games and stuff like that, I just filled my time with learning to play an instrument. He said, I just started playing guitar 4 years ago. I was like, 4 years ago? You're my age. What, dude? I thought,
Yep.
it was a shock to me.
Yeah, many of the cliches we hear are actually lies.
Yeah.
All
things in moderation. A little bit of heroin, a little bit of prostitution, moderate.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. Would you say that any type of music has its appropriate time and place to be put to a good use?
I would say any type of beneficial music
Okay.
has its appropriate time and place, because different kinds of music evoke different emotions. But then we want to stay away. That whole thing about moderation, that takes us to what temperance is. You do the good things in moderation and you stay away from the harmful things.
And I
So
would
the
say
same applies to music.
also appropriate situations.
There you go.
You wouldn't go to a funeral and play something super happy and lucky, that would maybe be a little bit inappropriate. So I think the setting really plays into that as well.
I have a maybe controversial taboo question, but I heard a pastor saying like certain music like arouses your body to move in a sexual way or something, and it's like he was talking about how dancing is almost like you see it in the animal kingdom, like when one wants to mate, they do this dance and stuff, and so he was generalizing that if you listen to music that causes you to move, then people are going to start hooking up and all this stuff. But is that okay in the marriage setting, like a husband and wife go in the room and Kenny G or whatever, like you were saying?
Right.
Well, actually, what he's saying is scientifically proven.
I believe that.
Different genres arouse certain effects in people. And it has been shown that certain types of rock music bring sexual stimulation. Then country and Western music, it's usually love songs. Somebody's done somebody wrong song. I lost my dog, I lost my girl, I lost whatever. So yes, there are certain types of music do evoke sensual or sensuous emotions in people. So I guess it would be up to the couple if they want to put on some Kenny G music and dance away in their bedrooms or their living room, wherever. It's up to them. But yeah, I would caution single people or Christians who congregate in places to play certain types of music, because it's going to evoke certain emotions that would just be contrary to the will of God or the law of God in terms of what plays out if you give way to the emotion that you are experiencing.
Do you remember when I was younger, I was listening to something, but I forget what, and you asked me, why are you listening to that? You married? I was like, what? What does that have to do with it? Little did I know. This whole thing. Yeah. Okay.
Have you noticed, like, whenever there's like a cartoon and there's always like the attractive woman comes in, it's like the saxophone or whatever. Always like they don't even have to say anything. That music comes, like you could be in the other room and hear that, and you're like, what's going on in there? There's something.
Exactly. Yeah, so there's a lot that we can say on this whole topic. We can go into all different kinds of directions. We have musicologists, neuroscientists, and researchers. They've all proven music has an effect on various aspects of us as humans and also other life forms, not just us. Many people view it as controversial, but music is not controversial.
Say that again.
Yeah, preach it.
Many people view it as controversial, but music is not controversial. It is not controversial at all. It is people who are controversial because of sin.
Yeah, I think there's actually certain churches that just don't bring instruments in or sing or anything. Is that an extreme, or
Some churches
are they just playing it
don't.
safe, maybe?
Some churches don't do any instrumentation because of this type of controversy.
No.
Because in any congregation, you have people who are for the modernization of the music style, and you have people who are against. And it creates so much conflict in a congregation. I know congregations that have split because of the music contradictions and arguments.
I remember being in South Africa, and it was a congregation, and they were singing a cappella, and it was as if I was standing and listening to an organ. First off, it was just like all-consuming. Everyone was like, it seems like perfect pitch, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. And they were enjoying themselves, and they were just playing off of each other in a sort of way. And it was, more beautiful than any band that I had heard up until that time.
I remember growing up, yes, we did have an organ or a piano in the congregation that I grew up in, but there were certain services where there was no one to play it, and we just sang. And you sang in different parts. So you had the sopranos and the altos and the tenors and the basses, and everyone just sang their part, and the music was always so beautiful. But over time, as time progressed and things got better, musical instruments were introduced, and it just, the nature of music, of the worship service itself changes based on the music.
Can I read to you a quote from Confucius?
Sure.
If one should desire to know whether a kingdom is well governed, if its morals are good or bad, the quality of its music will furnish the answer.
Wow.
There you go.
Whoa.
So if you want to know whether a people are governed by good morals or bad morals, study their music, and that'll tell you what that person is like.
That's amazing.
That's interesting.
And the opposite of that is also true. I can't remember the exact people, but I've listened to interviews of musicians and composers, and they will tell you, you can change the moral standing of a group over time, and they tell you over how much time by changing their music. So music is that powerful.
I remember Kanye West also talking about the devil being the leader of the choirs.
Yep.
And that was one thing that he mentioned in there. And if you just think about that thought, like he was the one that was closest to God. He understands the character of God the best. And how do you share that character with other people? Through music and stuff. So naturally, if he really was the leader of the choirs or whatever, he was designing that music, he would be in the best position to give that praise to God. And yet, if he knows that, he knows how to take you away from that the best.
Well, if he does, he was created with music a part of his system. And he was the choir director. And that's what he knows best. So and remember, everything that God has created, the devil has created a counterfeit. Why would music be the exception? And that's his forte. Why? You know, so we've looked at the science, we've looked at culture. What does the Bible say about music? Can you give examples or an example of a musical scenario in the Bible? Does anyone remember one?
Well, I know that Nebuchadnezzar set up a statue and said that everybody had to bow at the sound of the music and stuff. So that's a negative
So that's
example.
a good one. That's a good example because he said, at the sound of the music, bow down and worship. So there he knew that that music is integral to worship. And he knew that certain kinds of music would make people bow. And so that would be the kind of music that he used.
I remember Miriam, after the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, she took her tambourine and started dancing and singing.
Okay, so there we have another one. And that would have been a different kind of music because now this is joyous, happy music, celebration music, and they're dancing. And this is a different kind of dancing because the different styles of music evoke different styles of dancing.
Yeah.
When you go to listen to the Rockettes in New York City at Christmas time. You know, they do the line dancing and the foot kicking and stuff. You know, it's just happy, entertaining, really fulfilling kind of dancing. That's a different kind of dancing that you would do to the Kenny G, really emotional kind of music.
Yeah.
Moses taught the children of Israel to sing the 10 Commandments, so it was used as a teaching tool as well.
Yeah, and that takes us back to me learning the times tables, singing it.
Matthew 26:30 says, and when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. This is after the Last Supper.
Okay. So they had their Last Supper. They had a service, a solemn service, and they sang a hymn. Okay. So in Ephesians chapter 5, the second part of verse 18 and verse 19, it says, be filled with the Spirit. And that's the Holy Spirit. Speaking to yourself in psalms and hymns and spiritual, not carnal, spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. Now, according to the scripture, our music must align with what the Lord considers acceptable. So if we're going to worship God, then we need to do so with music that's acceptable to Him. And He gives us, He's specific, what He wants us to use: psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. Now, did you notice that the aspect of music that had to do with rhythm is absent from that? What does the verse call? Melody.
Melody.
Melody. So music is made up of melody, which is the tune of the song. Melody by itself does have its own tempo, beat, or rhythm. Then you have harmony, where you create parts that make the melody more beautiful. So they complement, they go together, and they just create this beautiful piece in your ear. And then you have rhythm, which is the beat. And that you can take the rhythm of the music, you can vary it, and you can create all these different types of emotions and reactions. But in music that's used for worship, God does not mention rhythm. He talks about melody. So could it be because the rhythm causes listeners to be consumed with their feelings and it shuts down the judicious thinking?
Wow. Yeah.
Because we have research studies that show when certain kinds of rhythms are used, the frontal lobe, Scotty, is shut down. The thinking part of your brain, the judicious part, the part that has to do with your willpower and reasoning, it is shut down.
I was just thinking about that, because rhythm kind of takes over. Like certain music's playing, you might not even be paying attention. You're tapping your toe to it, bobbing your head. You're not even thinking about it. But God is so based on free will. You know, it's more Satan's tactics to try and brainwash, propaganda, control.
Force.
Whereas God's just like, listen to this beautiful music. It might put you in a good mood, but it's not making you move, or it's not making you do anything out of your will. Whereas the rhythm, you don't have control over that.
The secular songs, I mean, they say that the rhythm's gonna get you.
I was just about to say that. What's her name? Something Esteban.
Yeah, Gloria Esteban.
Yeah, Gloria.
Rhythm is gonna get you. Rhythm is gonna get you. Rhythm is gonna get you.
She tells you, and in a lot of the songs, they actually tell you what the music is going to do to you.
Feel the rhythm and all.
Yeah, she's like, the rhythm is going to get you. And she's right. When you listen to that kind of music, your feet start to move by themselves. You don't have any volition. It just does.
God is a very intentional God. So I could see how that would conflict in the worship setting, to have that kind of rhythm, because God says, come, let us reason together. And if you're coming to study the Bible, but you're full of emotion, I can see how some conflict would be present there.
Yeah, because when there is high emotion, that goes into your limbic system. That's the feeling part of the brain. And your thinking is just shut off. Just think about any situation. If you get highly emotional about something, either angry or happy, you can't think straight.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. If the music is evoking all of those extreme emotions, you won't be able to think straight. You won't be able to reason with the scriptures that you're reading. You just won't. And so we see a lot of times now people, they attend church services and they come away, there's no change in behavior You don't see the effect of the sermons that they're listening to all the time, and they would tell you, oh, that was such a great sermon today.
Yeah, and what was the sermon about?
I don't know, I can't remember, but I know it was good. You know, that's why. Because, yes, they felt the emotion while it was happening, but because their thinking process was shut down, they don't remember.
Same happens with movies. I mean, I've done that. Walk out of a theater and be like, that was an awesome movie. And I'm like, man, I really can't even tell you what it's about, really.
Yep.
And I think the adverse effect of that is if you don't feel something in a worship setting, then it's like, well, I didn't feel anything, so therefore it must not be, you know. So you kind of walk away from it going, I just want to go somewhere where I feel like I was impacted, you know. And you're sort of ordering your life after the feelings, not after the, you know, the intellectual side, like you said.
And that's a caution right there, because God talks to us on a reasoning level.
Yeah.
He doesn't want us to do things just because we feel like it. And even so, the words that we use when we talk about worship are important. Now you hear a lot of people talking about the worship experience at this church. What is the worship experience? You know, if I go to worship, why do I have to have a specific worship experience? And so we just need to be careful, because words are also powerful.
That's true.
Our words are powerful. So if secular musicologists and the neuroscientists, they actually acknowledge the power of instrumental music, regardless of words, shouldn't Christians pay attention to the type of music that actually happens during their worship time?
Absolutely.
Especially if God specifies it in His Word?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys know Jimi Hendrix, right? So this is what he said. Music is a spiritual thing of its own. You can hypnotize people with the music. And when you get them at their weakest point, you can preach into their subconscious what you want to say.
Other musicians have said similar things. Madonna and stuff says that.
Yeah.
That
So
that
they
it's like a
know.
sermon or whatever.
Yeah.
Carlos Santana, I talked about that experience as well.
They know what they're doing. It's not random. They do know. It's the listener who doesn't know. Well, the uninformed listener doesn't know. This university music professor called Dr. Michael Ballum, he agrees with Hendrix's statement. He actually says the human mind shuts down after 3 or 4 repetitions of a rhythm or a melody or a harmonic progression. So whether it's the regular good part, the melody and the harmony, or the rhythmic part, which can be used to influence you, anytime you have repetitions beyond 3 or 4, your mind shuts down. So that goes into what Hendrix says, you're hypnotized.
I remember a musician watching a presentation on musician one time, and they played a hymn using like the chords that were with the hymn, and then they just shifted the chords to use like the 7th and 13th and like different
The
sounds,
odd
and
numbers.
it totally changed the way that the hymn was like sounding. I mean, it was really interesting. And when he'd play both ways, I mean, you could notice right off the bat that there's more here than just the words. You know, there's something else like that goes along with those notes.
Yeah, that's syncopation. Because when you have standard music goes on a 4/4 beat. And so you have the accent on the first and the third. So you have, you sing a song, onward Christian soldiers. You have the accent or the emphasis on those beats. And when they play with that and they move the accents to the third or the second and the fourth beat, that's what syncopation is. And what actually happens is it puts off the rhythm of your brain. And so it actually moves into the decision-making process. People make wrong decisions when their brain is not functioning in proper rhythm.
Interesting.
So that's why music is so powerful. It can actually influence you to do something that you wouldn't normally do under regular circumstances.
I don't remember who it was. I wish I knew the exact reference. It would be a lot better. But there was like a classical musician and his family, to wake him up, they would, like, he'd be upstairs in his bed and they would go to the piano and they'd play part of a song and just not do the last note. And it would drive him so crazy. He'd get up out of bed and go ping and do the last note. But it woke him up. Like he couldn't sit there and lay there knowing that that last note wasn't played.
I'm gonna try that with my kids.
Yeah, right. Da, 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 da.
You have to be sure how musical they are. Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about before man, when Lucifer was created, how he was created as a musical being. Today, Satan's master plan is to deceive and distract God's people in subtle ways that will stunt their spiritual growth. So we shouldn't feel discouraged or despondent or defeated anyway, because the same supreme being, God, who gave Lucifer those gifts, is the embodiment of music.
Amen.
And he has provided us with healthy choices. So here's the good news. Since we have the capacity to be self-directed, we can choose the kind of music we listen to. We can choose music that dispels negative passions and encourages positive emotions. And thus we can contribute to our optimal health, both the physical health and the mental health. And also, as we worship, we can choose appropriate music that aligns with God's word, so we know that our worship will be acceptable to him. For example, hymns are great. When I listen to instrumental music, one of my favorite pianists is Kendall Backus. Then lively a cappella music is another option that you can choose. I enjoy its melody, and I just appreciate the harmony that comes into it. And there's good contemporary gospel music also. And one of the musical groups that comes to mind is the Collinsworth family. So I encourage you today, audience, to use the principles we've discussed to guide your decisions as you seek to glorify God in your musical choices.
Well, this was fantastic, Mom. Thank you so much for presenting and sharing all this information with us. And we hope that that gave you a foundation to go out and research more and study more. There's so much out there. It's such a heavy topic. We could have 3, 4, 5 parts to it. But here's a challenge to you all. We'd like you to write in the comments section what your favorite style of music is, or maybe your favorite artists. We're really trying to grow a community here to help each other so we can all learn and grow together. If you have any questions or comments at all, leave that in the comments section. If you like the video, please like, comment, subscribe, share this to your friends and family, and we will see you next week on LED Live.